Prejudice now is based on stereotypes, but is specifically a harmful opinion, and also it's a conscious opinion. So a prejudice is something that you know you believe about a particular group. Bias, by contrast, is about the speed at which the brain works, and it may or may not be conscious. We call bias that you don't know that you have implicit bias or unknown bias. And bias might be against a group, it might be in favor of a group. The way the brain works is that we create these pathways that we can get information through quickly or not, right? This is what learning is. When you were very young and someone asked you a simple math question, it took a long time for your brain to do that, to work through it, but you've done that same problem so many times that now your brain can very quickly get to the answer. And so what bias does is it creates those pathways in your brain where you can much more quickly make an association of one type than you can of another. So it becomes a lot quicker to associate women with motherhood, for example, than it does to associate men with nurturing, right? It may be that someone who has biases also has similar prejudices, so they might have opinions that are backed up by bias, but it also might be the opposite of their consciously held opinions. So someone might believe something about a group of people, but have an implicit bias that goes against that and actually undermines their own belief. And we can test for this. One test that they do is they flash up pictures at random. Half the pictures have a black man in them, half them have a white man, and the men are either holding a gun or they're holding an object like a cell phone that might be mistaken for a gun. And it's made kind of like a game. You have two buttons to press. One button is shoot, one button is don't shoot. You get points if you correctly shoot someone who's holding a gun. You lose points if you shoot someone who's holding a cell phone, or if you fail to shoot someone who's holding a gun. And what they find is that, in general, people much more quickly respond to black men holding guns. They're more likely to erroneously shoot black men holding cell phones, but also just their hesitation is larger with white men. So when a picture of a white man comes up on the screen, their brain is slower to jump to the conclusion about what he's holding in his hand. We're talking milliseconds here, but that can make a life or death difference. When they ask people like a survey of their opinions, what they find is that this bias shows up even among people that don't have obviously racist opinions, right? So someone might answer on a survey, we have a standardized survey for measuring racism. They might give the answers that indicate that they don't have racist beliefs, and yet they still have this bias. It's still easier for their brain to jump to the conclusion that they should shoot a black man because he has a gun than it is for them to jump to the same conclusion about a white man. Discrimination is the next step. This is harmful actions based on prejudice or bias. So prejudice and bias are about the way the brain works. They're about how we think, beliefs that we have. Discrimination is about what we do in the world. So discrimination is something that actually hurts someone because it's an action. Prejudice and bias don't necessarily harm anyone unless they lead to discrimination. And people may or may not know that they're discriminating. In order to discriminate, unlike the previous things we've been talking about, you have to have power over someone, right? In order to take an action that is harmful to someone, you have to have some level of power over them such that you are able to harm them. That might be physical power, might be economic power, might be legal power, right? Might be academic power, all kinds of types of power, but you do need some form of power over that person in order to discriminate against them. Discrimination is something that happens to individuals, and it can happen both by action and omission. So it can happen by doing something that discriminates against someone, or it can be failing to do something that would advantage them while you are